tools that you will need to get started with line drawing botanicals are very simple. You just need some crisp white paper. For pens, I'm just going to be going over 3 of them. Probably not going to use the Pilot Fine Liner, but it's a good pen if you want to have that kind of bold, fine line. The other is the Sharpie Ultrafine. It's a little bit thinner than this guy. And then my personal favorite that I'll probably use in most of the class is the Micron. This is the 08, and they come in ranges. 05 and 08 are good starting points. The larger the number, the bolder the line. And so if you want something a bit thinner, I would say go 03 or 05. You don't have to have those for the class. The reason that I like to use them, it's permanent. The Sharpie is the Ultrafine, it's permanent, so these pens aren't going to bleed. You can watercolor over them. Obviously, if you watercolor over them, you will want to use the watercolor paper, 140 weight. Any sort of coloring in, you'll want to use the waterproof ink that's going to stay and last, and this won't fade. So a few very basic flowers that you can get started with. One of them, you will start with a stem. So just straight down, you can do a little curve at the top. And then we're going to do an understroke. It's also, you can consider it just a curve. And then from here, we're going to do just kind of a wavy line connecting it. And then in the dip here, you're going to come from the upper corner, wavy line just throughout there, and touch point before it gets to the other side. And then if you want, you can also do the same idea and layer just one more time, which makes it have the appearance of being closer in, whereas this one looks like it's a little further away. I like this style better. I think it just looks a little bit more natural, even though line drawing isn't supposed to look natural, but still fun. From here you can leave it as is, or you can add a couple lines in just for some texture. If we're doing the wildflowers, come straight down, and then we're going to branch off here, and then do 3. And then I like to keep things kind of uneven. I just think it adds more personality to the piece. And then I'm going to go in the middle of this branch straight up, and then I'm just going to do some very basic, very small circles at the end of each of those. And then from here, I can just continue to branch off to create a few more of these. You can continue that as long as you want to. My personal favorite, we will do just a regular circle for your center, and then this one takes a little bit of getting used to because you want to fit 5 petals in. So if you were to do that, you can outline where they're going to go if it's easier, otherwise you can freehand it. And so rather than doing our normal scoop petals, we're going to come out at a broader angle, and as we come back in, we're going to do a little bit of a dip and back down. And you're just going to do that the whole way around. And then from here, we're just going to add about 3 lines to the center of each of these, and the middle line is going to extend just a bit further than the ones on the side. And I'm kind of doing it a little bit fast so it gets wispy toward the end. And that's finished. And so that's what that looks like. And you can create a stem coming off of here or off of here, however you want to do that. And then another fun addition to this flower is overlapping. So I can bring something up from behind and just create a little bit of a fold as it's connecting. Looks like it has some overlapping layers, which makes it look a little more believable. Another flower we can get into is another one that I really like to do, so I'm just going to start with that very basic center, and these are kind of similar to like the leaves that we might draw, but I'm not going to start exactly where I started here, so I'm going to come up and then start just a bit off, just a bit further over, and connect, and then I'm going to do this the whole way around. And I'm not really going to care much about how many petals I'm putting in because I'm going to build off of them. So once that's done, I'm going to find the middle area of two petals that I just drew and bring a petal behind it. And then you can keep building on this as far as you want to go. I typically only do about 3 layers when the petals are smaller like this, because I don't want it to be too much or overkill. But I do want it to look layered. So now that's done. You can also do the same version, a little bigger center, and then come into a point, and then in to that point and match and meet it there. And then same thing, just build off of that. If you are combining a lot of flowers, another fun one that you can do that's very, very simple is to put your stem in. Just do a few loops like this, and then a couple at the end. And then if you want to, you can add that final middle one. So that's a really easy one, and that kind of goes along with the first one that we did. And you do want these smaller accents along with your more statement flowers because you want it to look more realistic if you're doing that wildflower botanical idea. Adding grass, adding leaves really make for a beautiful, complete illustration. And then moving into more of like a daisy type of flower, you can do your center, and then similar to this, only we're going to round our edges, and they're not going to meet so close toward the end. They're actually going to be closer in at the base and then come out and back in like this. And lots of really skinny petals. And then remember, layering is really good because then it looks more believable. With these petals, I don't want it to get too congested. A couple is fine, but you do want these to look like they are standalone petals. So I like to keep some separation and then do my layering. Makes a little bit of a difference in the illustration. You can play around with the centers, depending on how big they are. They do make an impact, so this is a bit smaller. I think it looks a little more realistic, but this one does as well because it looks like it's kind of opening up, whereas the petals on this one could be kind of more constricted around the center. Same with this one. So play around with the centers and see what you like. And then if you want to draw this type of flower more in this style, a real easy way to do it is to create your stem and then just create a little base and then have it connect somehow. You can do a round, you can kind of do this little angular point, and then do these same petals and just kind of make them in an arch shape. So I'm going to start on the side. And then come in the back for my layering. And I want to do a lot of these because we are looking at it from the side. And then I'm going to come back in and kind of create these little lines at the bottom. Another flower that you might have seen in doodle illustrations is this kind of uneven circle center areas of some kind. And you can do little circles, you can do one circle, you can do more of this type of center, and then you're just going to have these straight lines. They're almost like lollipop flowers. I think they're really fun. And when they're amidst others, they just add some character, which is fun. Similar to this, I'm going to show you if you were to wave the edges of a circle to a real small center and then have lines that almost connect to the end. Some of them may, but I'm going a little bit faster to make that wispy edge. If you place those near this top one, they can complement each other as if they're almost the same flower, just kind of opening up. Notice on this guy too, I'll show you. So see how my lines are curving outward, 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 and the same way the whole way through. If you were to do that straight, it doesn't give it the same effect. So it's still fun and it's still doodly, but if you're to create that curvature in there, it does make it look almost like it's opening up instead of being flat pasted. So if you want to do more of a cute daisy off of a couple stems with multiple flowers, if you just come out with a stem and get 3 coming off of the same line, doesn't matter how you lay that out, however you want to, and then skip just a small amount of space and do kind of a half circle. They look like full circles, but you're just going to do a straight line at the bottom and then loop back around. And then from here, you're going to draw your petals upside down. And that's it. And then you can obviously add leaves and grass, and we'll get into that in a little bit. And then another one I like to create that has the multiple facets is something similar to looking like lavender. And although this is not a realistic lavender piece, it's really fun to create, and it makes for a really awesome addition to these other flowers. So I'm going to start just a bit up from the bottom. I'm going to do these loops that connect, but I don't want them to look quite like petals. They're almost like balls, but just a little more oblong. And then for the next row, I'm going to do it just a little bit further in, so not quite as wide. And then same thing with this next one. And as I move up, I'm just going to make them smaller and smaller. As we move up, they're going to do these towers and layer. And I don't want them to all be the same size, and there should be some gaps in the stem also. For this next one, I'm going to just create that same width as we just did. A little bit smaller and then smaller. And now I'm going to skip some areas, not quite as wide as the very bottom. And then just getting smaller at the top, a little bit wider. So you can see I'm doing kind of a sporadic pattern. And then the top. And so another one would look like this. So there's different ways that you can do it. I would probably go more of this whimsical, a little less perfected shape. One that's typical that you've probably seen everywhere is a wish or the dandelion. So making a real small circle, and then I'm just going to create these stems off of it, and then a little bottom base. It may get lost in the illustration when it's so small, but that is okay. And then after here, I'm just going to create some lines that go straight out, some that are real short, some that are longer. And the reason I want the shorter ones is because I want it to not just appear on the outside, but also appear kind of throughout, which is the forefront closest to us. And then from here, so many different ways you can do the ends. I typically just do a really small X where one line is a little bit longer than the other. When it's small like this, it doesn't really matter. I just want to put some texture in there. Like that. And then you can do these little lines coming off of that. And then it looks like it's got the wind blown effect. And if you want to do more of a stemmy flower, just draw one line and draw these little lines off to the side. So what it's going to look like is the 5 petals, but real small. And I call these filler flowers. So they take up enough space and have enough texture to add dimension. You can also do something like this that's a little bit more leafy. So if I were to put in and for these, I'm just doing that shape, real small. I could do something like this and then just kind of throw in some leaves, which we're going to go into in a moment. So that can be really pretty to incorporate also. Something you'll see in every single flower illustration that I do that I'm just obsessed with creating is this kind of imperfect ball with some dots. And I typically only do the dots with concentration at the top for like light effect, but you can do it throughout and it looks just as cool. But I love these. I love these, and I usually do them nice and small, so if it's next to one, it's probably only that big. Going into like a rose type of flower, if you do a middle that's a little bit of a swirl but connects, and then from there, come off and connect, and then you want to overlap these layers and just keep building on it, that are imperfect squiggly layers that are nice and close to one another. You don't want to really vary with the size unless you want to kind of bring it out more toward the end, and that would be a good time to do it, but otherwise keep them nice and clean. You can do them smaller. Like that. You can do them when they're still budding. You create this almost like a crib that it sits in, and then one line down and then the other one sits on top of it, so that's kind of what it's wrapped up in. And then like that. That creates more of a rose that hasn't quite opened up yet. So create its little hangout area here and then come up and connect. And then you can create more of a petal once that's in, but I like them nice and simple. Another fun one would be the poppy. So what I do is I create the stem. You can do it before or after, but this nice wide center. You can do dots, you can do little circles, however you want to create your center. And then this one's easy. I separate into 4 parts, and so like the top petal and the bottom petal, it's gonna come out here, and then right where I started that one, come down and connect, and then the outer area and outer area. If you want to put it off, you can tilt that line that your base is, so instead of being completely horizontal. And I like to do these long ones, and then I like to also do where it's the opposite way. So and then you can create a little cradle for that as well, just right in here. So those are some more stemmy flowers, and then let's get into some leaves. In this segment, we will be moving into some basic leaves. When you're creating leaves, a lot of the design is going to be symmetric, and this isn't something that you have to do, but it does make things a bit easier to keep track of. So to get started, I'm going to do, you can either start with your stem into your middle line that separates the two parts of the leaf, or you can start with the outer shape and go back in. So I'll show you both examples. To start with the stem and go all the way up, looks like this, and then you can go back in and create your outer leaf. And then from here, you can go in and do your veins. And this is where the symmetry comes into play. So everything that I do on one side, I'm going to duplicate on the other side. And then the other way to do that is to create the shape of your leaf first. Go back in, create your stem, and then just drag that center line up. And you can even do where, like we talked about with the flowers, where there's a bit of curvature, it kind of just creates that lift. So just come up like this, and then copy that on the other side. Just like that. So leaves can be a lot of fun, and there's so many shapes that you can reference. You can look at photographs. Overall, just duplicate what you see, and they can be very, very simple. So to go into the more stemmy ones that you might add into your wildflower illustration, I'm going to start with one that's very simple. So I'm just going to draw my stem that comes straight up, and I'm going to draw a little leaf at the very end, and all that I'm going to do is start at the base, come up, loop around, and back down. So there's no curvature out then in, it's just very simple. I start here, come out and around, and then meet back where I began. And I'm going to do this the whole way down and match each side. So you can do this where you start with one and then do the other side, go to the next, do the other side, or you can go down on one side the whole way and then go back to the other side and add those in. Whatever feels right to you to keep that symmetry. And then that's it. So they're really, really simple. And then you can add the middle line into these leaves if you want to, or you can keep it simple and blank just as is. And there's a lot of versions that you can do of this style. So I'm going to show you another one, and it's going to almost be exactly the same. The difference is this point that usually starts at the middle is going to be on the outside. So the base is going to be that rounded curvature. So you can do it in two parts, how I dragged one side up and then dragged the other side up to meet it. Or if you feel confident, you can start at the point and loop around and come back out. And this is a hand motion that not everybody is used to doing right away. So when you go to duplicate the other side, it might be a little bit trickier to get that dip correct. So just practice and see what feels right. So see how two very similar designs look very different depending on the mood that you want. This one's a little bit more light and cheery. This one looks a little more sophisticated. So play around with those ideas and shapes, and then you can even do something where it starts a little bit further down and comes up and out, almost like a heart shape. So those leaves look really pretty too. Moving into a little more detail, you can do that main center area and then actually create some stems coming off of that. And I'm just going to do about 4 on each side. And then from there, I'm going to create 2 or 3 leaves to each stem. So on the top, I'm going to just throw in 2 here. And I'm going to design this just like I did this previous one. So I'm going to create this larger leaf and then just a little bit smaller on each side. And you don't have to do 3 on every single one. Sometimes it looks nice just adding 1 or 2. Just do whatever you feel like doing in this design. Mostly I want you to get comfortable with throwing in a few more for extra detail. And they can overlap a bit too, that's totally fine. Actually, I'm going to add 1 to the back. And they kind of almost look like they're budding, which is really pretty. It's just a nice addition to add to the overall illustration when you put everything together. You can also do a leafy design that comes up and then kind of tapers out, more branchy, and then do really, really skinny versions of that first stem that we did. So you almost don't even create that shape. It's more of just opening up just enough so you have that white space showing, and then come back down. And then if you see some areas that you might want to add a stem for some balance, that's what that would look like. This is one of my favorites because it almost looks like that airy wheat, and it creates a really nice natural addition. And then doing that longer grass, this is just something where it's almost this idea just elongated all the way up. I do this nice spike and then meet it with a point at the top. And then I will just repeat that real close to one another, just a bit higher and lower where it connects. And then some of it will come off where it's not perfect, but we want to just create that natural look. So that one has a little bend in it. So hopefully that gives you a good idea of what that would look like. And you can make these real short, you can make them really long, you can create some more bends in the top and the tips, you can do a couple of bends, and all that's going to look like is when you come up, just curve down, and then I usually do a little bit of a flip at the top just for more of a natural texture. Come back up and then shoot back down. One that's pretty to do that's more like a fern, you would come up, and then we're going to create stems like this, but we're going to have them varying. The length that you want your leaves to touch, that's actually how long the stem is going to be, and we're going to start short and get longer as we come down. And they're going to be fairly close together. And then match on the other side. And then from here, we're just going to create some really small oblong shapes along those lines that you just created. And it's going to go all the way down to the base middle stem there. Be sure to focus on doing these individually because you don't want it to look like they're running together. Even though it is such a small amount of space, it is noticeable, and you want it to look separate because each leaf is unique in its own character. So as you're moving quicker, just be mindful to not connect them. Another version of this would be to have those same longer stems that branch off, and then creating leaves such as these along the entire area. So that would look like doing this. So they come out in between just a bit more, almost touching. And this is a much fuller fern. And you can make these as long as you want to toward the bottom. They can come out a bit more. You can make it longer so that there's a little more graduation there. Once you get to the bottom, you can come in slightly more. So, for example, on this one, you could kind of stop it right here and then right here, so it kind of comes back in. So that's what that would look like. So same idea, different appearance. And you can build off something like this, again, with that same idea, by having those stems come off, but then on top of those, having even more branch off of the smaller ones. So they're all quite buildable. Just be sure, the best way and easiest way to keep track is to maintain your symmetry throughout. And starting with one step and moving on to the next after you've completed the symmetry throughout. So notice that I did add all those little extensions, but I haven't put anything on them yet until I had gone through and added the extensions to all of those stems. From there, that's when I can add them on. So I can keep it as is because it's more of that branchy effect, or I can go in now and add some leaves. I'm a big fan of these nodule type branches. And so that can look really pretty and decorative, and it can even be incorporated into more of a festive illustration. And then you can do leaves like this that are on a stem and more concentrated. So do those tiny little stems branching off, and then you can create some larger leaves so you can see them. And this is obviously more of a concentrated branch instead of seeing the whole thing, but this can be really nice coming out of an assortment of a bouquet. From here we would draw our center line. And then go through and create the veins just really close together. And because you're making them so close together, I wouldn't worry too much about keeping the symmetry just because it is going to look that way. If you're really particular in your illustration and you want to be able to see that, by all means, please do, but it's really not necessary. So that's what that would look like. Also a different feel. Another version of this that I really like is where you only add the veins to one side of the leaves. And then I want to also introduce an idea to you to watch where you're putting your center mark on your leaf. So, for example, if I am going to create a leaf that dips on one side and not the other, like here, and then this one's just going to meet it, It creates more of a personality in the shape as if it does have some movement. So rather than doing my center line straight from the base point to the top, I want to follow that curvature. So I'm going to come up and kind of do a dip and meet. And notice that now it almost looks like it has an appearance where it's slightly tilted to our right and almost facing upward. And so if I do that to this side, it's the same idea but almost to the left. So really tiny detail, not anything technical, just enough that will add a little more personality to your piece. It almost loosens it up just a little more. And then you can do it the other way around too, where the dip is on the bottom. And then now it looks like that one is more downward facing. And then from here, same idea as this, only just add it to one side, and you can choose which side. You can do the one that's that has a little more space, white space, or you can do the one that's less. I like to usually do the one that has a little more. I think that it completes the illustration a little more rather than looking like there's vacant areas. Sometimes I alternate, so I'll do one that's more open like this, and then I'll go in and do the smaller area. But when it's finished, it looks really cool because it only has that detail on one side. And I find that to be really pleasing to look at. So I just think it kind of dances almost, the illustration. So I think that doing things like that can be really fun. So I encourage you to try those out. And you can do them in the larger leaves. You can do like where only one side will have that. You can do it in the smaller version. It's not as visible, but as you can see, even those small details do make a lot of difference depending on how you want the look to go. So a little more playful, a little more sophisticated, a little more detail. This one's a little more, it's almost like an illusion of movement for two reasons. One is the curvature, and then two is the placement of where we did the veins. I also like to loosen my leaves up a bit. So although these are fun, when you want more of that kind of loose, airy design, feel free to come at it really loose, skip some areas. Don't perfect the leaves on the way down. Just get it kind of a scratchy, just quick. So notice that that is the same shape. It's almost more similar to this one, but overall, it's quickly done. You can see the sporadic placement, and it presents a different mood than these two do. So in the beginning, I encourage you to get your formation down, and then from there, start to loosen up and do some different pen strokes to figure out exactly how you want that end result to look. In this segment, we will be going over how to create laurels, and you can do them based off of the illustrations that we just went over, and you don't need any more than that. It's amazing how elaborate you can make some of these designs without using a ton of different concepts and then make them look different. Be sure to upload your progress in the project tab too, so that everybody can see it and get inspired as well. So I'm going to start with a laurel design, and basically all that laurels are is a wrapping double stem that doesn't connect, so it doesn't make a wreath, and it does have its ends that overlap at the bottom. And you can do these with the traditional leaves. You can do this adding flowers. And if it's hard for you to eyeball the symmetry, I do encourage you to place your design down with pencil at first, and it really does help, where you can take a ruler and make some marks where you would start and end. So I'm going to start a little bit to the left of the center and come up and around, and then the same thing over here. You can also turn your paper so you can see the other side really well to match as best you can. And they don't have to be perfect because you're going to add leaves and it's going to be more of a loose design anyway. And then from here, you can just create your leaves. So you can do it kind of like how we did connecting to the base. You can add some stems. I'm just going to do a real simple one to show you. And then I don't go all the way down past the connection. And then I'll come up on the other side and just do the same thing that I did on the right. And then once my leaves are in place, my symmetry looks a lot more sturdy. And then if you want to add a little bit of finish on the bottom, you can just create a small line and then drag it up and connect it as it's coming in. And then you can add ribbon, you can add flowers. Some real simple flowers that I've done are either on the base, just kind of off to the side, so something like that. And you can put those in throughout as saturated or sparsely as you desire. Another one that you can do that is a little more obvious is where you actually create the stem. And all I'm doing here is basically this exact same motion as these leaves, and I'm doing 5 of them and they're meeting in the middle. I'm not drawing a center part, I'm just putting those small petals in. So the placement is totally up to you. You can make these as long or as short as you want. They can only come in, they could only come out, they can do both. You can have 2 coming off of the same area. So that is a fun example of the laurels. And then you can write something in the center or do another illustration in the center. And then you're all set. I'm going to just do a real simple circle. It's going to be imperfect, and I'm fine with that. And then from here, I'm going to add my leaves and then incorporate some flowers. And I'm just going to kind of rush through it so you can see how I can incorporate what we just went over with leaves and flowers into a cylinder shape. So I'm just going to create some branches, and these can go in multiple directions. They can come off the center and off the inside and off the outside as well. And then from here, I'm going to add just some real basic leaves. And then after I have done that, I'm going to go in and add some flowers, and I'm going to put in some other types of leaves as well. And I'm just going to keep mixing that until I feel like it's complete. So I think that a nice addition would be some more of the rose flowers, and I'm not going to stem off. I'm just going to set them off the line a bit. And after I've got those added, I can add some buds where they come up and they just have that little cradle here and then up like this into that little point. And I'm not going to add very many of those, just a few. And then I'm going to add my go-to, and it has the center, and then it has the 5 petals, and they just come up and do a small dip. And then they have those quick, wispy 3 lines in the center. And now I'm going to go in and add some different types of leaves, and they're going to be those quick, sporadic ones. I tend to always add these wispy types to my wreaths. I just like the way that they look, and it fits my style a lot. Anytime that I don't like something that I'm doing, I tend to add stuff like this, and then it saves it for me. And I'm sure that once you experiment more, you'll find that style for yourself as well, and that go-to design that you'd like to do. And then lastly, on this one, I want to add my favorite flower too, which is that longer stem, imperfect circle, and a couple of dots. I just love how this one finishes things, because I think it changes the whole vibe. And you can leave it as is. You can write something inside of it. And then all done. Another wreath that you can do is the overlapping circles. And you can create this using one stroke, or you can go in and do a couple of different connection lines. One stroke, I think, makes it look a little more organic, and then from here you can add little leaves off of the lines themselves as stems, or go off and branch off like we did before. But for this one, I am just going to do some real wispy long ones. And then right here I changed direction, and feel free to do that as much as you want to. You can keep them all the same direction or change it up. And then they don't have to be consistent the whole way through. Just if you see a spot that looks a little more empty, you can throw in some leaves in that area. Like right here, I think that we could switch direction and add a little more throughout the center. And then off of here, I'm just going to throw in a few of those branches that have the little nodules at the ends. And then finish with some of those smaller circular flowers. So these are just some ideas that you can do, and again, the options are really limitless. You can do a lot of different things with these flower wreath designs. In this segment, I'm going to briefly go over some different cactus and succulent illustrations that you can do that are quite simple. So to begin with, I'm just going to show you the typical succulent, and it's going to be one of the same shapes as the leaves that we did, only in a floral form. So we're going to do this shape, but do 5 petals. Without a center. And then from there, we're going to build on that. And then make sure to keep the ones in the back thicker. You don't want them getting smaller. And then as you finish it off, you don't want huge gaps in between. So make sure that you are completing them pretty close together. And then another way would be to extend the petals, if you will. And you can do a cluster of 3. And then work off of those. So some of them will come out. And just keep creating those in a longer version. And then when you come to the bottom, get those a little bit shorter. And that's what that looks like. And then add the middle. And I'm going to do these kind of imperfect. I don't want that perfect straight line. I'm doing them a little off to the side just for that movement to show up. And then I'm going to leave the bottoms plain. So those are some succulents, and then I'm going to show you some cacti. To do a pot, just create a long rectangle with some smoothed edges. And these don't have to be perfect. Actually, I think the imperfect ones with the kind of dips in the line, it's an illustration style that I'm quite fond of myself. And then coming down, my pot's just going to have those curved edges, and they are going to sit just inside of the lip here. And so for this first one, it's real simple. I'm just going to bring this up and back down, and then I'm going to have another one right next to it that's kind of overlapping, or that's sitting behind the other. So that's going to be my overall shape, and then I'm going to create these just some quick lines that set, and what those are going to be essentially are these spikes that are coming off. And I'm just going to make those along the edges, and then that's it. And that's all you need to do. And then you can design the pot if you want to. You can put some little designs on there. Really anything that you want. And it creates a cute little illustration of some cacti. Another one that you can do is create your pot. And then similar to this, but do it in 3s. So have that long center one that comes up from behind, and then maybe just a smaller one to the side. And then it's going to be that same effect, just these quick little dashes with your pen. And then those quick spikes on the side. And you want them to come in past that line just a little bit, so it doesn't look like it's just coming from the line, but it actually is coming out of the plant itself. And then you can design your pot. Another one that's fun is you can create your pot. When you do those round round ones, and then do some curves from the outer parts inward, and then just create those spikes coming from the top, and they just get a little smaller toward the side. You can put these inside of terrariums. You can do some succulents inside a little jar with one of these leaves that has more of those rounded leaf designs. So incorporating all of that inside of a little jar is really cute too. And to do that, just make a cylinder shape, come down a little bit, match the bottom, create some lines, and then from here you would come out, out, and then down, and come back up. And so there's a little jar. You can actually bring that lip the rest of the way around too. And then just draw this one inside here. Let's put it here. Have this coming up, have this one here, and then put some flowers in. And so it actually will look, just doing this really quickly so you get an overall idea. So it can look really pretty inside of something like that. You can add a little rope. Lots of design options here. When you're drawing from real flowers and leaves, the things that you want to pay attention to are just overall shape, and then any sort of lines, creases, any shadows that you might see. And that's basically the same thing that we're going to see in photographs and in illustration. The things that we'll be focusing on with this flower are just the petals, the creases in the petals, and how they are shaded. We're just going to use line work on those for our line drawings, and then a little bit of texture in the middle. First I'm going to incorporate the center, and I'm just going to do some pinpoint dots that are really close together. You want to create the density here so you don't really see the separation. I'm going to add in the additional texture around that. And to do that, there's a couple different ways. You can do these little half circles like this. A little bit bigger, that looks like this. You can also do hollow circles. So that's really up to you. And I encourage you to create your own patterns here. And then from here I can go on to the petals and notice that they are narrow at the bottom, they come out, and then they meet again at the top. The largest part of the petal is about 3/4 of the way up, so we are going to make that our largest area and then come back in. And then at the very, very tip of the petal, you will see that there is a small little dip, like a tiny V. And so we're going to also incorporate that. And they're not super long. A good way to look at how long they are is measure the middle, so about the end of my pen to here, and then take that to the petal. So it's just going to be, it's about that length actually. So on your paper, think about the length here, and then your petal is going to be about the same. And I want to make these imperfect. And notice that as they come up, I'm actually putting some behind as well. And if it's easier, you can start and do the entire first circle around before you add anything to the back. And so narrow here, wider here, and then narrow here again. And then I encourage you to make some a little further apart, some a little closer together. And these don't have to be perfect because it is line drawing, so it's supposed to look more like a doodle. But you'll see how something very imperfect turns out to be something that looks a little more intricate once it's finished. And that looks good to me, and you can keep adding until you feel happy with it. I like to leave these little gaps in because I think it looks a little more organic. And then you see the lines actually come all the way through. For me, my style, I think it looks a little too cluttery. You can do it that way if you want to. My recommendation would be to avoid doing straight lines the whole way, but rather follow the curve of the petal. So if you were going to do the middle line, just follow the curve as you're coming up. But what I'm going to do is, and you can switch to a smaller tip pen for this, but I'm just going to keep the 05 and start from the middle and just do kind of a quick release there. So it's kind of like a flick of your pen. So I'm going to start in the middle and just go real fast outward. And I'm going to do that from every petal at the base. And you can also do this without doing it quickly. So if you have a petal, here's your base, you can do it like this too. And that's just a different style choice, and that looks really nice as well. And then I'm also going to do it at the tip. You can see they're kind of just minimal. It's where the base is reaching up and into the top. And I'm just going to do a couple little creases here and there because I'm not dragging the whole way through. I don't need to have it be that perfect match. And I don't need to put these on every single one of them either, so I might skip a few, which creates more of like a movement in a doodle, which is eye-pleasing because you don't usually see movement in doodling. And that's it. And then you have your flower. And now I'm going to show you a little more of an intricate flower, and we're just going to focus on mostly the outside shape because it's so small. Unless you're making this a pretty large version of this smaller flower, there's no need to get too detailed. So I'm going to start with the stem, and I'm using up a 0.2 micron. So there's a little bit of a knob here because I'm only doing one line and I'm not doing the one next to it. I'm not really going to worry about that. I'll just do a tiny sliver and then come up. And then we have a straight stem here that comes a little below that one. We have a flower that comes down, And then we have this guy here. And from the top, we're just going to create those little areas, have it come up. So see, it's very, very simple. I didn't put much in there. It's mostly just creating that shape and then having a center. And this is all it really has to look like. You don't even have to put much detail into it. It's almost kind of like a star, these little ones. So notice all I'm doing is finding where they're at, and it's not even exact because it doesn't have to be. This is just a reference, and so I feel happy with that. And to enlarge, to show you what this is actually looking like, it's this messy 5-point flower with a dot in the middle. And then on a couple of these, I just did this. So that's all. They're very basic. And on this one, there's one hanging here. So just find the ones that are prominently standing out to you. And that's it. So it doesn't look exactly like it, but it does replicate it in a way. And you can make these a little larger too, a little more going on so that it does kind of look like it has that overlap. So you can make this larger and make the stem have its center, or you can just create one solid line the whole way up. It bends toward the left, so I'm going to bend it toward the left. So I'm going to show you how to go through each of these needles without overthinking it, without making it too much detail. So we have some overlapping here. I'm going to take the one on the very top, just do a very quick line, the one coming from behind it. I'm just going to start a little bit up, have it connect. Does it have to be perfect? Nope, because all we are doing is using this as a reference. This one's tucking behind this next one, so I'm going to skip that much ahead. So you can see the gap here. I'm going to come to about here, create that, have that one tuck behind it. This one has a small imperfection. Those are great to add in. It just gives it a little more character. And then we have one overlapping again. And although it doesn't poke out the other side, I'm going to have it because I think that it adds a little extra character. And then moving up, we've got this, and then one's coming from behind, from the top, and that last one. So overall, similar idea. I've got a few more spaces than this one, so you can throw a few more in here. Whatever you think that you want to do. You can also add that middle line on a couple of them or on all of them, which adds a little more detail. And that's it. So it's a really, really quick build. Doesn't take long to get to. I'm going to show you another pressed one. And this one's going to be a flower. This is a pressed flower. I have these on hand, you guys, so you do not need to have pressed flowers, go through all that to get them. So I would just recommend either grabbing a flower that's sort of flat or using an image. So for this one, we have a couple petals here that are smaller and then some that are larger. A little bit of overlap here, a little different shapes with the width. So these, again, don't have to be perfect. I'm going to create a center. And then I'm going to bring this up and in. And then from the back, about here, and then about here. A good way to do these measurements is, do you see the base of this petal here, how it's almost looking like that line goes up and down? You'll notice that this line matches that next one. So a good rule of thumb is to follow that line through. and then dip in, and then this one's kind of coming from the back. And then this next one is parallel, but a lot smaller. And if you mess up, that's okay. This is just practicing, getting shapes in. If I ever mess up, but I like the way that the rest of the piece is looking, I actually just incorporate a couple more lines in and make it work for me, because then I have a finished piece that's a little more sketchy. And I actually like the way that looks. To do it a little more simply, I have a really hard time talking and drawing. So that would explain why that happens. So coming down. And these aren't exactly measured out. This one is just a little more clean. And then lastly, I have a pressed rose that looks really pretty. So this stem I am going to create the bulk of it, or the middle area rather, and then so you can see that I see the stem here on this side, not on this side, where it comes up and connects to the flower. This side I have a leaf, so I'm going to bring that down and to a point like this. There's a little overlap here. I can put that in, I don't have to, like this. And then this next one is coming up from about here, up and then down. So it's like up and then a dip, and then we have this curl that has this abrupt edge, curl underneath. Have this meet, and then it's curl, and then the fold happens right here. It's so small that you don't have to put that in. And then we have these little guys branching off. This here wraps into the flower. So it's up and then in, and then we have, I'm not going to create these ones until after I'm done doing this line. You can, it's just easier not to. So it's kind of a straight, it's not quite out and in, it's more like just straight up and in, like this. And now I'm going to put these in. And now I can do my actual petals. This first one is pretty flat. I do have a little bend in it. I don't know how that's going to look, so I'm going to do the outside part first. There is an imperfection here. With imperfections, I love putting them in. I think that they add character. You don't have to if you want it to look just a little more simple. And really, I'm just following what I see. And it's not going to be exact, but it is going to be similar enough that you can make out what this is. And then I'm going to create these veins. I don't want it to look too veiny, so I just kind of like to do a few lines in here, and then I'm going to do the back parts and then the ones that are sticking out the side. And that's it. So really easy way to build up some flowers without getting too intricate, too out of control. So really, really, really simple. So you can do this with images or pressed botanicals. And if you're working off a real leaf, you'll notice that the veins are pretty symmetric. Although they're not coming off exactly the same points, they are reaching in the same fashion where they're coming up and then curving. They can get pretty veiny, so you can create these as detailed or as simple as you want, similar to the rest. So you can start with the stem, you can also start with the shape, and then the middle at the front, here we go, and then veins we're kind of coming from the base, a little bit of a bend here, upward. And then this next one is a little offset from here. So we're going to come up a bit more for that one. And same thing here. And then these two come back to matching. And then we go offset again. And so that's really all you need to do. There's a little stem. Then you have a leaf. You can also do the same thing and just kind of put in some real light stemming. So different variations of that. You can also put in that texture. And that's just by kind of dragging but shaking. You shake your pen so it's not that super smooth line. And then every once in a while just dip back in towards yourself. And then line. So different ways, same leaf, but hopefully this will give you an idea of how you can grab one leaf and incorporate it with your own style choice.
Hi, my name is Jane Sten Peever. I'm an illustrator and designer. Welcome to my studio. In my first class, I showed you basic steps on how to get started on drawing mandalas. In this class, I'm going to introduce you to using circular grids. I will show you how to draw each of the grids, and then we will work with them to create a variety of frameworks. We'll use similar methods for each mandala, and you'll see how depending on which grid you use, you can achieve different looks. The project for this class will be to choose one of the grids and draw an 8-inch mandala, either using my ideas or experimenting with your own. I encourage you to be creative in this class, and I encourage you to experiment. There is no right or wrong way to do it. What you draw is your style. This will evolve the more that you draw. Like everything else, it comes with practice. I'm here to guide you in the journey, and I'll share the techniques I use and show you my favorite ways to do this. You don't need any drawing skills to do this, just simple shapes, pencil to paper, and the desire to learn. So just hit that enroll button and let's get creative. See you there. To get started, we'll gather our supplies. You won't need much. A pencil of your choosing. I like a mechanical pencil because I never need to sharpen it. A felt tip pen. I like to have a variety of widths available, but one thick and one thin will get you going. And an eraser. I like to use a putty eraser because I can make it fit into small spaces. And I also like to use a white eraser to get those tough pencil lines. You'll also need a compass, and these come in a variety of styles. To help us draw our grids, we're going to need a protractor. I like to use the 360-degree circular protractor, but you can also use a 180-degree protractor that you find in just about every geometry math set. You'll also need a ruler, and I like to use a 12-inch one. To secure our grid to our drawing paper, you're going to need tape. This will hold it in place while we draw. I like to use the painter's tape because it comes off so easily. The drawing paper that I use is just your regular 8.5 by 11 inch white copy paper. One thing you should be aware of is how the markers you use react to the paper you're using. In this case, my thicker marker bled through the back, but my thinner marker didn't. It all depends on the type of paper and the type of ink. It isn't something I'm really concerned about in this case, but it is something you should be aware of. So the project for this class is going to be an 8-inch mandala. I'm going to show you how to use 3 different grids. We're going to learn how to create the grids, and then we're going to create a framework with each grid, and then I'm going to walk you through creating the detail and the inking for each mandala. In your project, just choose one of those grids and create a framework and create a mandala within that. It can be right along line with the one that I create, and you can just show us your progress with that one, or if you want to, you can get creative and you can show us one that you've created on your own. I am going to show you how to draw each of the grids because it's a great thing to know how to do, but I also have in the class info section downloadable copies of all 3 grids that you can print out for your own purposes. And now that we have all our supplies and we know what our project is, let's get started. The first grid will be divided into 6 sections. All of our grids will be 8 inches in diameter, like our mandalas. We start with drawing our 8-inch line across the middle of our page and marking off 1-inch sections all the way across. When setting up your compass, be sure to match the pencil point and the compass point to start with. This sets you up for an even and accurate circle. Set up your compass point to the 4-inch center mark on your line and the pencil to the outer edge mark and draw your first 8-inch circle. Continue moving the pencil in 1 inch at a time so that you will draw a 6-inch circle, a 4-inch circle, and finally a 2-inch circle on your grid. Now we're going to use the protractor to mark out our sections. So line it up with the center line and the center point, and you're going to mark out 60-degree sections all the way around your circle to divide it into 6. Then we're going to use our ruler to connect the points, and we're going to end up with a grid that has 6 separate sections in it. And because I want to use this grid repeatedly, I'll go over all these lines with a heavier marker so that I can use it the way I want. And my grid is ready to go. So now I'm going to place some tape on there so I can place my blank sheet of paper over top and they won't move around. And I'm ready to start my framework. So we're going to place our compass where the 4-inch circle intersects with one of the 60-degree lines. And we're going to draw a circle. I'm going to repeat this all the way around our grid so that I end up with 6 intersecting circles. What the grid does for me is it gives me equally measured points all the way around the circle to place the compass. And I end up with 6 equally distanced identical circles, which really creates a beautiful little pattern. I'm going to add a little bit more. I'm going to place the compass at where the 8-inch circle intersects the 60-degree line, and I'm going to draw between 2 points I've already established in the pattern within the petals. So it's just a small arc that is going in between 2 points that I have found in the drawing that I've made. And again, I put the compass point where the 8-inch circle intersects the 60-degree lines and draw a small arc within the drawing that creates another section of petals that I can fill in with detail. So now I'm ready to remove the grid from the back of my drawing, but before I'm finished, I have a few more things I want to do. Using my ruler, I'm going to divide up some of the sections I already have in half. So I'll just line up the points that are equal distance across and through the center, and then I just draw a line. And it divides up the sections nicely so that it's easier for me to fill. The smaller the section, the easier I can put detail into it. And there we have our framework. So now we can get into the detail, and I'll see you in the next lesson. Welcome back, and let's have some fun adding some detail. I'm going to start with this center section, and I'm going to add little stacking petals that lean towards the left, but I'm only going to do this in every second section. I'm going to skip over every second one. So they'll have petals leaning to the left, because what I'm going to do in the sections that I skip over is I'm going to create the mirror image and lean the petals to the right. This is going to give a framing look to the section above it. Really, you can do anything you want as long as you're consistent. In the outer ones, I'm going to create the same pattern in the same way. I'm going to mirror. One side will be to the right, one side will be to the left. And I'm going to do this all the way around, and it will also create a framework for that center piece. Now in the center piece, I'm going to create little petals that mirror each other towards the center line. So I'm just going to fill them wherever they can fit. I'm going to try to get in 5 into each section, 1 in the center and then 2 down each side. And I'll do that all the way around on the same side. And then when I come back to do the opposite side, I'm going to mirror these petals the same way so that they create almost a perfect reflection of each other. And I'll do that all the way around. So I have a lot of petals going on in this design, so now I'm just going to put in some straight lines, well, curved lines, and I'm going to move with the curve of the section. So it kind of just gives you an overlapping, almost a tiling effect. And then in the second half, I'm going to mirror the same idea but reverse it so that the lines connect to the bottom section and the curves are at the top. This will, when it's done, give you another really neat effect. And I'll do this all the way around as well. So now it's time to get into the inking, and all I do, just as I did in my first class, is you just go over the lines that you've already put in pencil. So the inking is a nice relaxing process because the lines are already on the paper and all you have to do is go over them with your pen. I usually go over them all with the same size of pen, and then later on I add in my darker detail and my thicker lines. Often I change my mind in the process of where I'm going to fill stuff in and where the lines are going to get thick and even what lines are going to get left out. So in this process I can relax and let my mind look at the design and decide what I'm keeping and what I'm going to get rid of. At this point I'll usually sit back and look at it for a bit and decide where I'm going to put the dark in. Every time I add another dark section all the way around, I'll sit back and look at it and just see where it's kind of calling for more dark or less. It's kind of a figure it out as you go. Often the plans I have when I started aren't how the design ends up in the end. It's really personal preference, and you'll know as you go what you like and what you don't like. Go at it slowly, sit back and look at what you've done as you do it, add in little things. It's supposed to be fun, it's your design, do it any way that you want. I'm going to have a finished version of each of my mandalas in the project page, so you'll get to see where my final choices were as far as inking in the dark and the light. So let's move on now to an 8 section. See you in the next one. So now let's work with a grid that's divided into 8 sections. So follow the same directions that you did for the 6th section and create your circles the same way. And then we're going to use our protractor to divide it into 8 sections. So 360 degrees divided by 8 is 45 degrees. So place your marks every 45 degrees and then you're going to draw in your lines. Now using our tape, we're going to secure our blank sheet over top of our grid so that we can see the grid through it, and we're going to get started on our framework. Similar to what we did on the last 6 section mandala, we're going to place our compass point on the 4-inch circle where it intersects with each of the 45-degree lines. The span between your compass point and your pencil point will be 2 inches, so the pencil point goes right through the center. And then you're going to draw your circle, and you will continue this all the way around. You'll end up with 8 4-inch circles inside your 8-inch mandala, and they'll overlap, creating a really interesting pattern for your framework. And one more thing I want to do is pull out my ruler and start drawing some lines that divide some of these sections in half. I can use the grid lines underneath to help me do this. I like to divide up some of the framework sections. It helps me add in symmetrical detail when I get to that point. And let's head into the next lesson and start adding in some detail. Okay, welcome back. Now we're going to try to add some detail into this 8-section mandala. I'm going to start with the center section by dividing these petals up a little bit further by mimicking the curve. And then I'm going to fill each one with circles. You don't need a lot of drawing skills to do these. Simple objects can give you the most beautiful designs. Really, it's just a lot of lines and circles. One of the easiest ways to do this is to just create an inset of the section that you're working on, which is the opposite of an outline. So you just create the same shape within the shape. Another idea is just to fan out lines. A lot of my inspiration comes from nature, and if you look at shells or leaves or feathers, they all just have simple lines creating the most beautiful effects. If you find the space is bigger than you want it to be, you can use the inset technique to make the section smaller just by drawing lines to bring the section into a smaller size. Then you can add any object you feel that fits well. Simple petals are easy to do, and then you can use the inset technique again, and you can add smaller petals inside the original petals to create a little more detail. In this last area, I'm going to fill it with different sizes of petals, and I'm going to use the center line to help me create a symmetrical pattern. Again, everything is a guideline and you're not looking for perfection. The whole point of the hand drawing is that the mandala has its own character, and that character comes from each of your elements not being perfect or identical. And now we're going to pull out our pens and start inking our design. And again, as I showed you in my first class, we just go over the design we've already laid out in pencil. It can be a very relaxing process to just trace over the lines that we've already decided on. At this point, I do my inking all freehand, but please feel free to use a ruler and a compass to get the accuracy in the lines that you would like. If I'm doing client work, I tend to use the ruler and compass when I am inking. Remember, the pencil is your first draft and the ink is your final say. So this is the point at which you make any changes that you'd like to do. I find the inking process as relaxing as coloring the mandala. It's my form of meditation. So now that you have all the lines inked, you can go back in and start adding in some black areas. I enjoy this process. You can use the mandala as it is now as a coloring page and get your colored pencils and markers out to fill in the sections as you please. I like to add a little more black in, just for dramatic effect. Take the time to sit back and look at your design and let it speak to you. It will tell you where to add a little more work and a little more detail, and what areas are already finished. I'll have the final mandalas in the project section. I'll post them so that you can see where I made my final decisions with the details and adding in the black and the inking process. So now let's move on to a 12-section mandala. See you there. Okay, so now we're going to work with a 12-section grid. This grid is the most complex of the 3 that I'm going to show you. The more complex the grids are, the more options you have of creating intricate frameworks. With this grid, I've drawn the circles every ½ inch instead of every 1 inch. This results in 8 circles within your 8-inch grid. So when you draw the line, you'll mark off every ½ inch, and you'll use these marks to draw your circles as we did with the first grid. Now the grid lines are placed every 30 degrees in order to get your 12 sections. So you're going to place your protractor in the center, and you're going to mark off 30-degree sections and then draw in your grid lines. The way you get the degrees is you divide 360 degrees for the circle by 12, and that leaves you with 30 degrees for each of the 12 sections. And the next step is we place our tape onto our grid so that we can place our blank sheet over top and it won't move around, and we'll be able to see our grid through the sheet. Now, as with the first 2 mandala frameworks we did, we're going to place the point of the compass on the 4-inch circle where it intersects with each 30-degree line of the grid. The span of the compass will be 2 inches so that the pencil point passes through the center. Repeat this circle all the way around and you'll end up with 12 4-inch circles within your 8-inch circle that create yet another beautiful framework. Note that we use the same compass span and placement on each of the grids, but yet because they're divided up differently, each one gave us a different framework. Now we'll grab a ruler and divide up our sections a little bit more. We can use the grid lines underneath to help us out with this. I've chosen to only divide the outer sections, and I'm going to leave the center petals alone as a complete section. I'm also going to divide this next section, and I'm going to bring the line all the way through to the center just to help me out when I'm adding the detail into those center petals. It'll give me a little more of a defined space to work in. And then when I'm all done, we have yet another unique and beautiful framework. I can hardly wait to get adding some detail in on this, so I'll see you in the next lesson. And now you know how to use circular grids to create an endless variety of stunning mandalas. Take these techniques and play around with them. Simply by changing the placement and width of the compass, you can create any number of interesting frameworks. Remember to post your progress in the project section and let me know how you are doing. My hope in this course is that when I show you these techniques and you walk through them with me, that I have created a spark in you that will also take you into creating your own mandalas and exploring that own creative side of yourself.